So hi everybody. If you don't know me, I'm Joe. I'm the head of the sound group subcommission, and our host today and moderator is Bassam. So I'm just going to turn it over to him and let him get started.
In today's panel, we're gonna present two Egyptian sound designers. One is from Cairo city, the capital of Egypt, and the second one originally is from the second capital of Egypt, which is Alexandria, which is on the Mediterranean. Right this minute, he's between Cairo and San Francisco. So he's speaking to him from San Francisco. Okay, let me present first Mafdy Thabet, is an Egyptian sound engineer. He's an owner and a manager of Film Studio Egypt company. Since a very early age, Mafdy has shown great interest in music, especially in regard how to sound works, how musical instruments and sound equipment operate. This interest drove him to study more and seek a career in music and sound engineering. In 1992, he started working as a music composer, and in 1998, he launched his own audio solution company, Film Studio Egypt. He began with mainly in-house music production, gradually expanded his experience and scope of work to include providing audio services for live recording, live concerts, TV music shows, and live events. In a short time, he managed to put his company as one of the leading sound solution companies in Egypt, which can accommodate for events in almost all types of places, indoor, small, medium, and large halls, and theaters, modern churches, cathedrals, closed stadiums, as well as types of outdoor venues. Mafdy has built a good reputation in sound as a sound engineer of various genres of music, including jazz, rock, pop, oriental, gospel, and mass choirs. However, he developed a special love for orchestration and musical theater. He has participated as a sound engineer of some renewed theatrical performances such as Layla, Les Miserables, and The Journey of the Holy Family opera in Egypt, in addition to Oliver Twist in Jordan. So please welcome Mafdy Thabet. Hello, Mafdy.
Thank you for this big introduction. It's too much for me. Thank you. I need to speak to Arabic because my English is not good enough to explain what I need to explain to you. So I asked Bassam to translate for me. Thank you, Bassam, in advance. أنا حابب أتكلم عن التجهيز للأعمال المسرحية الموسيقية في مصر.
He would like to start his speech about the preparation of the theatrical, musical theatrical productions in Egypt.
المسرح الغنائي في مصر الماركت بتاعه مش كله بيبقى لايف، معظمه بيبقى بلاي باك، لكن الحاجات اللايف لسه مش فاميليار كتيرة لأنه فيها أسباب اقتصادية كتير بتمنع من وجود أعمال لونج تيرم، فبيبقى الأعمال كلها شورت تيرم على مدى قصير. المسرحية بتاخد مثلا ماكسيمم شهر شهرين، أحيانا نعمل مسرحية لمدة يوم واحد.
speaks about the singing theater production. He say that the production itself, most of it is pre-prepared. The sound production, most of it is pre-prepared to begin with, as well as it's not a big, because of financial production reasons. So sometimes it takes longer time to prepare. Sometimes it might take 2-3 months to prepare in order to finalize financial production issues.
احنا بندرس المسرحيه في الاول من جهه الاكويبمنت الموسيقيه اللي هتلعب، عدد المغنيين، الراقصين، مين هيغني ويرقص في نفس الوقت، بحيث ان احنا نروح الثياتر جاهزين الى اقصى مدى نقدر عليه.
So the time gap between the production issues, those preparation time, 3 months or 2 months, it gives him the time to search more about the technical writer, about the music instruments, about the singers, and the system design as well, before he starts with the rehearsals inside the theaters.
أنا هتكلم عن 4 examples أنا اشتركت فيهم من low production events، وكانت المسرحية already هتبقى 3 أيام، دي كانت أوليفر تويست. هتكلم عن مسرحية كمان اتعملت لمدة يوم واحد، والمسرح كان محجوز لمدة يوم واحد، ما كانش عندنا يوم كمان سيت اب، هو يوم بنركب ونعمل ساوند تراك ونشتغل. بتكلم عن مسرحيه عن 2 برودكشن، عن بيج برودكشن. واحده منهم كان عندنا يوم واحد نظبط حالنا ويوم واحد نشتغل، وواحده كمان اللي هي ليله، دي كانت المسرحيه قعدنا 60 يوم بنعرض، لكن طبعا كان عندنا وقت كافي ان احنا نعمل كل حاجه.
In today's panel, he's gonna speak about 4 productions, from 2 low budget productions, 1 medium production, and 2 grand productions as well, but with its circumstances of even the timing, and like for example, one of the productions that took, as he said, that took only 1 day. He reserved the theater, they set up, and then they perform. One other production, they had only 2 days, 1 day for set up and rehearse, and the other day is to perform. Another 2 productions, which is he had 2 days, 1 day of set up and sound check and rehearse, and the second day is a performing, and the last one is 60 days of rehearsal, of performance. So at this example, you have more chance to line check and sit up and to take more time to work on the performance and so on.
اوكي، اور اكزامبل كان فيري لو برودكشن، فدي كانت مسرحيه اوليفر. كان التكنيكال تيم كله كان رايح من مصر، والمايسترو والمخرج، وكان البرودكشن ده بيتنفذ باطفال اللاجئين السوريين اللي موجودين في الاردن، وجبنا ناس كواير من الكوايرز الكبيره اللي موجوده في الاردن علشان يغنوا الادوار بتاعه الكبار.
The first production, it was abroad. It was in Jordan, and the whole crew had to travel from Cairo to Jordan, and it was a low production, and it was a production with the refugees, Syrian kids. So they brought up the crew that traveled from Cairo was the director, the maestro, and the sound engineer and the equipment for sure, the sound designer. And they brought from Jordan, they brought the choir, big choir, but as well they used the refugees' children that they joined the choir to sing.
العمل ده كان صعوبته في احنا في الاول اشترينا النوت بتاعه البيج اوركستريشن، وبعدين لما رحنا الاردن قبل العمل بوقت طويل علشان نبتدي نمرن الاوركسترا ما لقيناش عدد العازفين الكافي اللي يقدر يقرا النوت بتاعه اوليفر، والكميه اللي لقيناهم ما قدروش ينفذوا المكتوب كويس، فاضطرينا نتشنج البلان ونشتري النوت بتاعه التسعه بلاير اللي هم خشب وكونترباس وايقاع، وجبنا فرقه صغيره من شمال اوروبا جت بسرعه قبل العرض بكام يوم علشان تنفذ السمول النوت القليله او العدد القليل بتاع الموسيقيين.
The play is the Oliver twist, and first they bought the notes or the music sheets for the big orchestra. But later on, when they went to Jordan, they didn't find the grand orchestra to work with, so they had to change their plan to find a smaller orchestra. So they managed to get 9 wood instruments, which is معلش قول تاني the strings.
لا مش strings، كان في خشب وبيانو وايقاع وكونترباس وواحد براس سكشن.
define خشب معلش يعني. نعم. Okay.
And 1 brass section and 1 electric piano and 1 percussion and 1 contrabass.
Okay. The oud, which is an oriental instrument that's similar to the guitar.
No.
The oud, I'm trying to say.
Not مش عود يا بسام. wood آلات خشب wood.
ايوه انا قلت طب ايه هي الآلات الخشب؟
كانت كلارينيت وفلوت.
Okay. Clarinet and flute. Okay, not the oud, because we do have another instrument that it's the wood wind instruments, and contrabass, 1 brass section, and okay, go ahead.
اوكي، فالبلان المتغير ده خلانا كمان تحت ضغط الوقت ان احنا هنبتدي نعمل البلان على موسيقيين اقل، وهنبتدي التمارين من جديد، ونبتدي نعمل الخطه بتاعه كل حاجه من جديد خالص. وكان عندنا عبء بتاع انه الاطفال اللاجئين السوريين احنا عايزينهم يغنوا، فهم مش بروفيشنالز او حتى مش متعلمين كويس، بس انت عايز تخليهم يغنوا عشان ينبسطوا. فكان حاجه صعبه جدا، وكمان في بلد ما فيهاش معدات اكويبمنت بتاعت صوت كفايه.
The challenge in that production was that we had to change the plan, so we have to rehearse again with a smaller number of musicians, as well as the refugees' children were not singers, were not actual singers, they were normal children. So we had to rehearse with them, we had to work with them, as well as Jordan, as you say, at that time, he didn't have good equipment, sound equipment to work on. So this is like gave them a lot of challenges that how to put that together and change their plan and work again from the beginning of the process.
Okay, فالبروجكت البروسيس اللي خدناها في ان احنا نبقى ادق في المعلومات والميكروفونات اللي هتشتغل في كل سين والفواصل الموسيقيه هتبقى ازاي. والمسرح كان صغير، فالانترودكشن كانت ان الاطفال يخشوا من بين الناس. اللي شاف اوليفر تويست قبل كده هم بيخشوا من شمال ويمين المسرح فوق، بس عدد الاطفال كان اكبر من انه يخش في المكان ده، فخلناهم دخلوا من وسط الناس. فابتدى التحدي كمان يكبر ان احنا ازاي نطلع صوت الاطفال كويس في صوت المسرح وهم داخلين بيغنوا.
One other point, another point of the challenge, the usual Oliver twist that the singers or the choirs comes from upper left, right of the stage. In their case, they had a small auditorium as well as a big number of children. So they managed to enter the children through the audience. And one of the challenges that they faced, that how to capture the choir, the kids choir, the big number that comes through the audience, and then to the stage.
تاني واحد نفسي اتكلم فيه كان التحدي بتاعه انه المسرح محجوز يوم واحد وهنعمل فيه لميزيرابل لمدة يوم واحد.
Second example that he's gonna present today is Les Miserables, and the main challenge that he faced, the production, that the theater and the auditorium was reserved only for one day.
ده احتاج ان انا اروح احضر طبعا 3-4 بروفات، احفظ اللي هيحصل بالظبط، ويبقى التكنيكال رايدر ديتيلد جدا، واحفظ واكتب السينز بتاعت كل حاجه على الميكسر قبل ما اروح، علشان احنا معانا يوم واحد هنركب ونتمرن ونشتغل بالليل ونفك بعد الحفله. هي مسرحيه يوم واحد.
That example, I had to rehearse before. I have to pre-production or pre-prepare, so I had to know exactly, very detailed, a technical rider. Let me say explain technical rider for the non-sound people. A technical rider is a sheet that tells what exactly you need in the production, between microphone, wiring, patch, and everything that for your system.
العمل ده اتنفذ في مصر واتمرنا في مصر، وكان من فرقه اسمها فابريكا، فهم فرقه مسرح غنائي اصلا موجودين. فالمشاكل التقنيه بتاعه الغنى والسينجينج بوزيشن ما كانتش فيها مشاكل، والاوركسترا العازفين بتوعها كانوا من مصر، فالى حد كبير احسن بكتير من السيتويشن الاولانيه. لكن كان التكنيكال ايشوز بتاعه الثياتر ان احنا هنركب ونشتغل في نفس اليوم، لانه كان هو الثياتر محجوز يوم واحد.
In that example, he had the option with a good singing theater group. They are good singers. Plus, he had that good big orchestra from Egypt, and they were a professional musician, a grand orchestra professional musician. The only challenge for him that we had one day to rehearse, to install the system, to rehearse, perform, and then log off the system and leave.
اوكي. ثالث حاجه عايز اتكلم فيها، وده اللي فيه الحاجات الاهم، انه كان عندي برودكشن هيقعد 60 يوم اللي هي مسرحيه ليله، وكان بايديا اغير حاجات كتيره اكتر من كل المسرحيات التانية، لانه في 60 يوم عرض. فابتدينا نحاول نختار ميكروفونات جديده غير الهيدسيتس اللي الناس بتلبسها في العادي.
that example, the next example was a bigger production, large scale production. I had 60 days of performance, so I had the chance to choose and to go into detail. So, for example, I had to choose new microphone rather than the headsets for the production.
المخرج كان محتاج يجيب الميكروفونات اللي هي بتركب في الشعر فوق، وانا كنت متحمس لها لانها بتبعد عن مشاكل البوبينج اللي هي اللي جنب البق والحركه بتاعه الميكروفونات الكتير، لانه كان كل الناس الممثلين عندهم رقصات في العمل دوت.
That performance, the director wanted the microphones that you install EPA, that you install on the head instead of the headsets that face a lot of popping, a lot of movement while you move. So go ahead.
وبالنسبه لي كانت المفاجاه انه لما جبت مايك عينه علشان اجربه اكتشفنا انه في language issue، انه اللغه العربي chest voice وكلام كتير من الشفايف ت الب غير التي والب سوري الت غير التي والب غير البي. الحروف والفوناتيك العربي عندها كلام كتير من الشفايف صوته اوطى وعنده chest voice كتير، فالميكروفون ما كانش موفق زي الهيدسيتس.
In that situation, he got a demo microphone to start to check on it for that position. And at that time, he discovered that for the Arabic language itself, its phonetics, it is also a chest language that comes from the chest. So, for example, he discovered that the microphone is well known and very successful worldwide. He discovered that the Arabic T letter, for example, is not similar like T in English. So a lot of the phonetics were not the same because of the language. So he discovered that this, for example, microphone is not very successful with the Egyptian or the Arabic language rather than the normal headset.
غير ان المغنيين الاوبرا هو بيعرف يطلع الفويس بدل ما هو كله من المنطقه اللي تحت دي، بيعرف ياخد الفويس هنا، بيعرف يطلع صوت من وشه اكتر من مغني العربي.
And the opera singer, for example, they are capable of moving the singing from the chest up to the head, and as well from the bones of the face. But in the Arabic orchestra singer or the Arabic singer, it's not the case. It's all the chest or the lips, and it's also the face, but it's not the same. It's not like the orchestra. They don't have the same control like the orchestra singers.
فانتهى الامر بان احنا رجعنا تاني لفكره الميكروفونات الدي بي اي الهيدسيتس علشان اللانجوج ايشو.
So we decided in that production that we're gonna return back to the headsets, the same EPA, but the headsets, the small headsets for the language phonetics issue.
لكن ظهر كمان ميوزيكال ايشو، انه العمل كان فيوجن ما بين الاوركسترا وما بين الروك، والمكان الحفره اللي قاعد فيها الميوزيشنز حفره مش كبيره، فاحنا عندنا باند روك مكون من درامر بتاع هيفي ميتال وبازست والكتريك جيتار وبيانو، والناحيه الثانيه عندي سيت اب شيمبر بتاع سترينجز، فعندي بريمو وسكوندو وفيولا وتشيلو وكونترباس.
In that production, he had a fusion genre of music, a classical fusion rock. So a metal drummer, bassist, electric guitar, and on the other side he had a full chamber of orchestra that's sitting at the same place.
فحلينا الموقف بانه الدرامز جبناها عملناها درامز الكتريك علشان المسرح كان الجست الاولاني مش بعيد عن المسرح خالص، فالصفوف الفي اي بي الاولانيه كانت قريبه خالص من الحفره، فبدلنا الدرامز بدرامز الكتريك، والامب الجيتار بعدناه بعيد وحطينا له مايكنج في الاول، وبعدين استغنينا عن وجود الامبليفاير على بعضه واستعملنا امب سيميليشن. وسمعنا كل الكومبو بان اير مونيتورز علشان نحاول نقلل النويز بتاعت الكومبو.
For example, they because of the auditorium was also small, so they replaced the acoustic drums to an electric drum, and they reduced down. They tried with the electric amplifiers for the electric guitar, but later on they had to stop the electric amplifier and they used a simulated sound for the electric guitar, as well as the positioning of the guitarist was put in far away to not disturb the chamber. Also, they used a minimum. They used the in-ear monitors for a minimum to reduce for the acoustic instruments to reduce the noise that's happening between the metal combo and the chamber.
فضل مشكله المونيتورنج بتاعت المغنيين على الستيج. المغنيين كانوا بيغنوا وبيرقصوا في نفس الوقت، وهم ما كانوش فاميليار بالانير مونيتور. احنا كنا متفقين في الاتفاقات كلها والتحضيرات اللي رحنا بيها المسرح عشان ننفذ انه كل السينجرز هيسمعوا انير مونيتورز. لما رحنا هناك كل السينجرز ما كانوش مستريحين لفكره الانير مونيتورز، كانت مضايقه ودنهم والحركه وما كانوش فاميليار بيها كفايه فما استريحوش. فكان معايا مهندس ديكور هو موجود في الجمعيه هنا، كان دكتور حازم شبل، فاتفقنا مع بعض ان احنا نعلق المونيتورز بتاعت السينجرز اللي على الستيج، يخلي الديكور حجمه اوطى علشان يقدر يتحرك بيه، ونحط المونيتورز اراوند الستيج من فوق.
For the singers monitoring, before at the preparation they agreed that we were going to use the in-ear. Because of the singers, they didn't use to an in-ear as well as they were dancing on the stage. They had to change that plan later on. And in this situation, they at that performance, Hazem Shib, he's the set designer. So they made together an arrangement to how to rig monitors. Hazem made the set like shorter, as well as they managed to put the widgets, rig it above the singer.
اخر اكزامبل النهارده ده كان فيه ايشوز مختلفه خالص عن الثلاثه الباقيين. كانت مسرحيه بتحكي عن رحله العائله المقدسه في مصر.
it ولا no? Okay.
الو الو.
The performance before that called Layla. The next example, معلش قول تاني.
اوكي، اخر اكزامبل النهارده هو كانت مسرحيه او اوبرا رحله العائله المقدسه لمصر، بتحكي عن زياره العائله المقدسه في مصر.
The next performance is the performance of the journey of the Holy Family. And in that performance, they talk about the journey of the Holy Family, the Christian Holy Family.
التشالنج المره دي كان في انواع الماتش بتاع الانسترومنتس. عايزين نعمل صوت فرعوني وفي نفس الوقت صوت اورينتال، وفي نفس الوقت عايزين نحط هارموني ويسترن بتاع اوركسترا. فكان الفيوجن ما بين الثلاث حاجات دول.
In that example, the challenge was the mix between three things: the mix between the pharaonic instruments and the Oriental instruments, plus the orchestra, the westernized orchestra normally.
ولانه العمل فيه قصه اطفال وحاجات، فكانوا جايبين كورال، ماس كورال بتاع اطفال وماس كواير بيغني فور فويسز غير السوليستات.
For the singing, we had two groups of singers: a mass choir for the kids and mass choir for singers, like adults.
Singing for alto and tenor and bass. And we have solos, instruments and solo singing. الرقصات المرة دي اللي بيرقصوا مش بيغنوا، فده كان أسهل، لكن كانت الفكرة في إنه عندنا فوليوم ايشو. شكل العمل ده لو شلت الميكروفونات من عليه مش هتسمع الموضوع بالانس، مش زي الأوركسترا الكلاسيك تشيل الميكروفونات هتسمع كل الحاجات زي ما هي. لا، انت لو شلت الميكروفونات في آلات مش هتتسمع، زي العود، نون، الطبلة صوتها عالي قوي على الأوركسترا كلها. كان عندنا فوليوم ايشو في الموضوع.
Okay, in that performance, we did have volume issues between mixing those three kinds of music. So the normal classic orchestra, if you take off the microphones and you listen to what the musicians playing, you will find a natural balance of the instrument. But in here, because of the Oriental instruments, you have oud, which is I was trying to explain before. It's similar, very close to guitar, but it is a different shape. You do have what's called a noon, which is an Oriental finger tipping string instrument, and we do have the darabuka, the Oriental percussion, which is very, very loud in sound compared to the even louder on the orchestra. So when we take off the microphones of these with the orchestra, they still loud. So we were facing level issues between the Oriental music and the full orchestra level.
حاجه كمان الباك جراوند بتاعت المونيتورنج، العازفين اللي جايين من اللي بيلعبوا اورينتال عندهم باك جراوند مونيتورنج مختلف عن شكل الباك جراوند مونيتورنج بتاع الاوركسترا الكلاسيك، غير شكل المونيتورنج بتاع الكواير.
The nature of listening for listening level for the Oriental musicians, it's very loud compared to the classical musicians, compared to the other instruments compared to the singer listening level. So another challenge that they face, like how to balance between this kind of mixed fusion between Oriental and classical musicians.
اوكي. شكرا لوقتكم، شكرا ان انتم سمحتوا لي ان انا اتكلم واشترك معاكم في اليوم.
Thank you so much for listening, for the panel, to allow me to present today and to see you all. The next for today is Sami. Sami is an Egyptian sound designer, an audio engineer, a record producer based between Cairo and San Francisco Bay Area. His journey started with theater and live concerts in his hometown Alexandria. But soon after he started his career, after he started his expanding his territory to include the rest of Egypt, the Middle East, and Europe, working with a wide range of acts from experimental theater companies to international music artists and everything in between. Hussein's passion for sound took him on a parallel journey in different auditory disciplines, such as studio record production, post-production audio, film sound design, and even teaching many audio-related subjects to younger generations, whether he's mixing a live show, working on a sound design for theater, or producing music in the studio. Hussein liked to call his artistic approach the storytelling by sound. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hussein Sami in the house. Welcome, Hussein.
Thank you, Bassam. Thanks everyone for being here. Thank you, Mafdy, for the lovely insight about the production, technical things that we face in the region, and especially in Egypt. First thing, I want to apologize. I'm in the middle of the street here. I wasn't supposed to be here, but yeah, I mean, it could be a little bit loud and noisy in the background, but that's fine. It should be okay. I'm 5 minutes away from an airport too. So I think Mafdy took us on a nice adventure with what to expect in a large scale production in Egypt, especially with musicals. Mostly he showed snippets and showed videos and talked about production mainly in medium scale and large scale and even small scale musicals. Let me start with something. I'm a little bit of a generalist and why things are done as opposed to how and what we do. So let me take it back a few steps. As theater people and artists living in the Middle East in general, in Egypt in particular, in our case, I think sound is like the sonic soundscape, the sonic texture that we, since the day we're born, that we are exposed to, is something very different than most of the other you know, I would say the main hubs of theater in the world, whether it's anywhere in Europe or the States. It's not the kind of big city noise with pedestrians and cars honking and sirens and all that, and airplanes passing by and all that stuff. No, I'm talking about more cultural, more language oriented, more I don't know. It's just so, if anyone has been to a Middle Eastern country, they could relate to this. It is a very rich sonic texture. So by the time there's audience waiting at the doors to enter a theater show, they're already exposed in 5, 10, 15 minutes to so much as far as sound and sonic experience. So by the time they enter the auditorium, like the hall or the entrance, the foyer of the theater, they're already saturated with sound. So here's my point: is the challenge is not only productional, it's not only technical, it's also I would say philosophical. What should we provide to the audience? Should it be only the realistic way of doing sound design? Is it just singing and the music technically to be perfect and all that stuff? Or should we take them to a different realm or a parallel universe, I would say? So that's a very artistic issue, probably not in this roundtable session. But what I'm saying is, sound is the should I use the word underdog in theater in Egypt? Again, if any Arab-speaking person in the whole Middle East, they are exposed to the Egyptian commercial theater, which is like TV screened, and I grew up on that type of theater. And if I wasn't lucky enough to be exposed to real theater, I would have thought this is the theater, like all lit up for the TV cameras, of course, to be to take the different shots with no problems, and then it's mostly comedy. It's 99% comedy. Big names, actors, directors, even TV and film directors would direct for theater in that case, because it's big names, right? So we want the big name film directors to direct for theater, which is a completely different thing. So that's from starting in the 40s and even the 30s. That was the background of theater. If you stop someone on the street and ask them randomly, what is theater? What is your favorite theater performance? They would tell you one of those televised version of theater performances, and they'll probably tell you that they never attended a theater show in their lives. So, Bassam, do you agree with me on these? Can you guys hear me well? I don't want to keep talking, doing all the talking, but do you? Yeah, right? Do you agree with me? That's the background of theater in Egypt for the most part, the commercial theater.
Yeah, but this is the commercial that everybody saw, the commercial or televised, as you say. But as well, we had a lot what we call in today's world, we can call it the underground theater, or the private groups that struggled, yes, financially struggled with creating productions, and then later they managed to run that kind of production on to the level that they became very famous, and to the level of that they became very popular. I'll give an example for that from the black and white era, like الريحاني group, Naguib al-Rihani, or Yusuf Bek Wahbi. We're talking about 1950s, 1960s, black and white era of theater. It started from a very poor groups of theater that putting together and trying to do productions to the level that they became very commercial. I don't mean with a commercial that good or bad. No, we're talking about that from that they struggling with the production, definitely not thinking about sound design at that time, thinking about just putting together a production with only a set design, and then they became very, very popular. They became on television. They became part of the even films. So it is an era that that black and white, and then we move. If we move all the time until 70s, 80s, this is the era of the commercial, totally comedian commercial farce, I'll call it, in the theater in Egypt. And this is similar like what's happening in today's world in Broadway. It's like it's like selling tickets and the box office theater. And then we to the era of early 90s, we can speak about the new wave, the new generation of, I'll call it the underground scene of theater productions until today. So here we can start from that era. We can start how your generation, how my generation, how Mafdy's generation, like we struggled with that in sound design, and we worked on that in sound design. How did you start? How did you get into production, and especially in the second capital in Alexandria? I am very keen to listen and make people listen to that, because Alexandria is the city on the Mediterranean. It is the nearest point from Europe, and it's a seaside city that's receiving from Europe a lot of visitors geographically. So tell me about your city soundscape, city guest, and then theater production and sound design in your panel essay.
Yeah, I agree with most of you, what you said. As far as the cosmopolitan Alexandria, my hometown, my home city of Alexandria, it's I think it shares the same kind of soundscape as most of the Mediterranean cities across the Mediterranean basin. And I had the chance to work with beautiful sound designer and musician from Sicily, from Italy, and was actually we were sharing a lot in common, a lot of things. Especially Sicily is in the south, and it's an island, and it's very similar to the Middle Eastern culture. So, anyways, as a cosmopolitan city, we were exposed, as well as Cairo, but there's always that fascination about like, oh, let's go to where the Library of Alexandria existed, right? To check this city out and make some projects. And I was lucky enough to start off with a multinational production with the Baka Theater in Gothenburg, and the cast and crew from all across the Arab region. It was Midsummer Night's Dream, and it was in Arabic with a live band on stage. That was my kickoff in theater. Of course, I worked before that, the very little stuff, but as a like a hobbyist, as an amateur. But that was my first professional paid gig, if you will. So that was a big thing happening in Alexandria, taking place there. Everyone is staying there in some sort of a workshop type for producing, and designers would gather and they would have some kind of workshops for outside people to participate, and that created a very nice hub in the city. And that was in 2001. But even before that, in the mid-90s, started a wave of alternative art, and especially in theater and music as well. Towards the end of the 90s, it was a different thing than the everyday commercial media supported. And by media, I'm talking about state media support, because at that time we didn't have so many private sector TV stations or radio stations or any of that. So it was all state media, and state media, the taste and the agendas, and so they push towards something. So what I'm talking about here is the overall culture, the audible culture of people in Egypt, especially, and the Middle East. It used to be like that. It used to be just whatever you see on TV, and that what you see on TV, even if you mention those very modest productions in the 40s and the 50s that turned to be very big later on, they didn't think of sound design. They thought of sound as like sound cues. Maybe they would have a soundboard operator on the crew, but they wouldn't have a sound designer. I've seen a lot of that. You have a sound engineer or soundboard operator, but you don't have a sound designer. Because why? Is it something we see? You don't see it, so it's not a design. That was the mentality until probably the mid 90s, the second half of the 90s, and up until now. So there was a shift. So what I'm saying is sound design is not as old as a craft, and as a design subject in Egypt as it is in other places in the world. So we're talking about a very young discipline, which is so rich, but it's still very young. So that's why with all the stories and the nice insight that Mafdy underlined, there's a lot of production issues involved. the production can dictate a lot of what you do, what you can do, and what you cannot do as a sound designer. You wish to do that, but you don't have time. I mean, come on, how come? The theater needs time. We all need time, especially sound, because no one can see it. And believe me, I've worked with a lot of theater directors from very, amateur theater companies and very beginner, even interns, to big names, at least in Egypt and in other places. But they all don't pay attention. Not all of them. Most of them, they don't pay attention until the last tier of production, the last stage of production, to sound. They don't pay attention to sound from the beginning. So you do stuff, you keep doing stuff. You have production meetings, you have designers meetings with the director, but they're not fully with the sound yet. Some of them do, but most of them don't. And if you don't have the culture already, and no one can see if you're talking about problems or big issues or technical problems, no one can see them. It's not apparent to everyone, like set design or lighting. Oh, this light is reflecting here. Sound is so different in terms of technical stuff, like using surround speakers, using fancy stuff like some spot speakers in places just for keying some cues and all that stuff. Maybe it's not working. Maybe it's buzzing all the time, and no one can pay attention to that. But if a light is reflecting off of a screen, for example, or off of like something in the set that it shouldn't be, anyone can point it out. But with sound is a little bit more, I would say, intricate, or I could say a little bit more specialized. Not every passerby in the theater can point out a problem with sound, technically especially. But when I'm talking about sound design, I haven't seen a lot of people in Egypt and in the Middle East talking about, oh, what's the approach that we want to talk about or like to take for this piece? Whether it's a realistic approach, whether it's something else, maybe it could be very minimalist, it could be something very experimental. That kind of conversations, we don't have a lot of that. And that's why we tend to go to the production and maybe make it big, but we don't think about the basics a lot in that sense. I've seen a lot of good stuff. I'm not saying that sound design is not existent in Egypt, but what I'm saying is it's new and we're still learning, and it's not as old as it should be, or like as the other countries were. Do you agree with me, Bassam, on this?
Definitely, because the term of sound design itself, it goes all the time to the composer. So the performance or the play script will go to a composer to put the music sheets or the compositions into it, and then probably most of the time he's gonna add the role of sound designing some effects or some elements into his composition, and the market gets used to that. Maybe in film production there is a sound design, and there is, as we call ourselves, the new generation, or we became old now, but we went all through that journey. Yes, I am full white. So I became old. So we spent a lot of time, all of us, like between learning, I will speak about myself in that sense, building my own libraries. I am one of the people that were sampling since very early 90s or late 80s. The idea of collecting sound, I worked on capturing on that, and then to the streets and building my own, and then to the mini disc, and then later on. So building my own libraries that I can use. Most of the material, it was used later in electronic music or in experimental production, which is alternative music, not into a specific sound design for performance. So in a way, this is the nature of our country. Also, we can Mafdy, if you got something to say about that as well, you barely find a director that comes to you and tell you, let's sit with the composer, you as a sound designer, let's sit with the composer and let's discuss the general sound, how it's gonna be.
في البدايه بحب اقعد مع الكومبوزر ولو في مايسترو، يعني لو المؤلف غير المايسترو بحب اقعد مع المؤلف الاول، لانه المؤلف هو اللي بيبقى خلق الساوند اللي عايز العمل ده يطلع بيه، لانه هو ممكن يبقى جايب اوركسترا بس هو عايز صوت عربي، فلازم بعد كده نروح نقعد مع المايسترو علشان هنخلق الساوند ده ازاي، مش بس ان احنا هنقعد الميوزيشنز ونحط عليهم مايكروفونات، بنبقى في اللون بتاع الميكسنج عامل ازاي، طريق عدد الالات ممكن اغيره، لانه يعني مثلا محتاج السترينجز تبقى اكبر، التشيلو يبقى اكبر، على حسب نوع الكتابه اللي هو كاتبها، وهو متخيل ان انا هقدر اكبر ده بالساوند، لكن مش بتبقى بالظبط كده.
Usually, I prefer, as Mafdy said, like I prefer to sit with the composer first, and then later meet the maestro and listen from them how he would like to put together the composition, and for the maestro also how he would like to the full work to sound like, not just only amplification term or stage of amplification, no, but the general work, how it sounds like. So not all the time this is happening.
Yeah.
Between Mafdy and between Hussien, between me and the production, and there is differences. Everyone has his own experience. Everyone has his own, and on the production, sometimes they tell you, as a sound designer, I need that sound design, and I don't have production for it. And sometimes they don't even think about the sound design. So most of us went through the phase of learning sound as a science, plus mixing, technical engineering, and the artistic side. I'll speak about myself later, but Hussien can talk about his artistic side of being a sound engineer, sound designer. how can you tell us, Hussien, about that?
First, I want to agree with you about the learning, or like the science of sound. I've seen, even in the States, I've seen a lot of sound designers who are sound designer as a job description, but they didn't dig deep in that how sound is, how it is, how different sounds are, and why the material, the reflections. I'm not talking I'm talking about sound, not audio, by the way. That's one thing. One big thing is sound. We're talking about sound design. We're not audio design. So don't talk about speakers, and don't talk about microphones and techniques and editing and plugins, and especially the newer generations. They were born with a laptop in their hands. So that's the front end, but there's a back end. That's the beginning of everything. Different material, produce sound. And I think if you're a musician, you should be a sound designer. If you are a sound engineer, like studio or live, you should be a sound designer. If you are a video editor, you should be a sound designer. And not more than that. I'm not going to be like, I'm not so fanatic about sound, but if you're dealing with sound in any way, you're a musician, you're a singer, and you need to study sound, not your vocal cords only, the other chords and the other, material on the planet that can produce sound. You should pay a little bit of, just give it time to understand what's happening here. I'm not talking about EQ and compression. I'm just talking about basic stuff. Clap under a ceiling, and there will be some reflections. The basic stuff, acoustics, sound. So here's the thing. We're still learning, right, Bassam? I mean, we're not like, we started learning back in my case, it's in the 90s. But I'm still learning. And I've got that kind of a pedagogical approach to everything. So there's the say, it's if you can't beat them, join them. My interpretation to this is, especially in art, if you can't convince them to do something, then teach them. So I started teaching. I started doing some workshops and courses. So I create my own course. I develop my own, and Mafdy has the experience of doing this as well, with a great video series that he just released very recently, but he did things before that. Because when you see the lack of understanding on one subject, you want to teach people about it. If you like video games, you start telling everyone about video games. If you like cooking, you tell people about cooking and recipes and stuff. So it was the same for me. I wanted to tell people about sound design and audio and audio engineering and all that stuff. Yes, I played music like most of my peers, but I didn't feel that I'm a musician. That's why I felt like sound is my instrument. Sound, anything that could produce sound could be a potential instrument to me. Instrument in terms of it's a figure of speech. It's not like I don't play the instrument of sound. Just I can use it in a way, and to tell stories as well. And that's when theater and film came into my career. I started with theater, but then later on I took more bigger productions. The artistic way of dealing with sound starts with learning the sound. So I was lucky enough to be part of mentors in Cairo with a very nice initiative that is called To Be Continued Festival. I was part of the team of mentors to mentor those young directors and choreographers and tell them about sound and how can they use sound. technically speaking, but before that, and most importantly to me, is the artistic way of using sound in their performances. So half of those performances were it's kind of a lab festival. So there's workshops for set design, for lighting design, and I had the mentorship thing with sound. I didn't have a proper workshop for sound design, but I would sit with those musicians or composers for the different and like members of the crew, because not all the performances naturally didn't have all composers and professionals and musicians and stuff. So I would sit with the director and whoever is involved with sound from the team, and we talk about sound, the possibilities of using sound out of how we read the script. We talk conceptually about things, but we talk also technically about other stuff. So that was one thing, and for me it was a big eye opener that anyone can learn about sound and can use sound very creatively in their performances, and that was just I would say a 6-week mentorship program. It didn't last longer than that, and the results for the short kind of performances was very interesting to me, and those directors and crews and those performances got some praise about how they use sound, which is so flattering to me. So again, artistically speaking, for me, because as Bassam said in the beginning, I also taught or still teach sometimes from time to time audio and sound design and other stuff related to sound. I cannot separate the teaching, the pedagogical approach from the artistic approach. So back in 2012, I had that idea that was always coming up. I want to do something with that is related to kaleidoscopes. The kaleidoscopes were always my fascination as a little kid, and that was my comfort zone. I had a little kaleidoscope, and I would look in the kaleidoscope, and that was my hallucination trip, if you will. That was my my go-to, imaginary friend. Yeah. Anyway, so the kaleidoscope was a very interesting subject to become something artistic. But I'm no musician. I'm no director. I'm at best a music producer, like a record producer, not a music producer. At the time, didn't even I had stopped playing music for a long time, like almost 14 years, 2012. So I decided, it came up with a residency in Marseille, and learning more about interactive media and multimedia. I decided to put together a multimedia interactive music performance that had 4 musicians on stage, but also there's some kind of soft choreography, not very intricate. They're not dancers, but there's movement on stage, and the music is telling the whole story. There's no story. There's no storyline. The music told everything. Introduced the characters, introduced the conflicts, and did all the work, all the emotions that are supposed to be in a very, I would say, classic Roman type of story, but with an open ending. So it was a 45-minute piece. It was still in the works when we showed for one night. Unfortunately, we didn't show more than that. But the idea is to
Can we hear
give the lead to sound.
Can we hear a sample of that thing? Because we are about to. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's 10:40 now. Unfortunately, I don't have. Let me see. I can find something online maybe, but I don't have a video thing that I can show. I don't have anything on my computer right now. I have some photos, but I don't think that's gonna be enough.
Audio is more important in our.
But anyways, yeah.
More than the video and the pictures to show.
I couldn't find when I told you I would dig deep in the. I couldn't find any on my old hard drives, but I know I have it somewhere. Yeah. So anyways, that is whenever I see the lack of something, I want to be proactive about it. So that's why this piece came together. Like, hey, I want to show people that sound design can lead, can be a main character, because most of the cues, most of the atmospheres that give context to the music that's being played, or the movement on stage, or the video screens. Like we had 3 video screens, and it was that kind of experimental. But everything was led by sound. So sound was telling actually the story. And that changed everything for me. Like since then, my whole approach is different. I turned back to playing music, and it changed my life. But anyways, I hope this answered your question about the artistic approach. It's pretty generally what I said, but again, you know, in a very young sound design department in a country like Egypt and maybe the Middle East, most of the Middle Eastern countries, it is hard to talk about like, oh, my, you know, artistic approach is so and so and so. It's more like, hey, there's more to be done, and it's an ongoing process to learn.
Let's hear now. Let's hear your examples, and then we open for if anybody have a questions between Mafdy's panel and then Hussien's panel.
I'll tell you to go ahead because I'm still looking for that thing. I don't know if we can leave a link later on or not, but I cannot find it right now on YouTube. I think it was a mix of using Arabic with English, so the combination, I cannot think of the combination very well to find it right now. But anyways, if you wanna keep going with the Q&As, we have 15 minutes left.
What do you think, folks? If anybody have a question, go ahead.
Put my mic on.
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I was listening, but because of my lights moving a lot, I was my camera off. I think it's very, very inspiring hearing from all of you, you know, from different areas from Egypt and what's going on and the reality. And I've been listening many times referring to Alexandria as the second capital And then there is another new capital building, being built, or building a new opera house and some facilities. So what do we expect? I mean, what will be, what from your eyes, guys, that we are from there, how do you see this new capital and what to expect as a context, and what influences that will bring, if it's possible to tell us already?
Okay, the Cairo is the old capital city. Alexandria is the second capital city. In moving, it's a kind of gentrification with the new capital city. They're trying, our population is growing up, so they decided to open a new capital city. Moving, especially with the old city, it's loaded with a lot of governmental buildings. It's loaded with, the whole country is running from the capital, the old capital city. So the project started that first we have to build that new capital city, new city, to move out the operation from the old buildings, and then gradually it will become the new capital city, the capital city. But when we talk about in our soul, we grow up, Cairo and Alexandria is the major city, is the old capital. It is like, I think Bert visited Egypt. I don't know, Abi, if you visit. Cairo is every day I'll go to the old city. Every day. If I'm going from one side of the city to another side, I have to pass by. So in our soul, this is the center city. This is and Alexandria as another capital, the second capital, just population. But imagine that Cairo population during the summer, for example, is moving to a seaside city. So it became another city. By itself, it is a second capital. So today, with the new capital city, it's a bit far away. Yes. I doubt that every day I need to go. Only if I work in the new project. Yes, then I have to do it. Did that answer your question, Abby?
Yeah, thank you, Bassam, for the explanation, but also from the cultural point of view, and, transferring all of that to this new capital. Of course, people are not moving that completely, but yes, some people need, because, more services, more. So what to expect from the cultural side and approach, and also we've been talking about these cities, these areas, as the environment, as the inspiration, as the influences. So from the cultural approach and the influences you see, they are being brought into this new capital. How you could tell us a bit about?
The point is.
Do you mind, Bassam, if I?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Abby, thanks for your question. What I think is that you're talking about the cultural impact of having that new capital. I don't think we can separate the political talk from the cultural talk in this sense, but just leave the political stuff on the side. Opinions
don't please
also
bring
on the side.
On board. I love talking about the political.
No. But what I think is happening in the new capital is there is a model that is very successful in the Middle East. From the outside, is so. And even in the States, when I tell someone, hey, I went to Dubai last week or like last month, oh, Dubai is a big thing, and they think Dubai is really like a cultural, the new cultural capital of the Middle East. It could be possibly so, but I don't think if we're talking like about a specific production that will take place in Dubai, for example, they will have to get most of the crew and most of the cast from the other countries surrounding. So it's not a cultural spot. It's probably a very commercially acclaimed spot, touristy, the economy. A lot of things are very nice there, but that's the model that most of the Arab countries are trying to approach. They want to be like Dubai or like the United Arab Emirates. So I think it's going to be another copy of Dubai, but in Egypt, with all the big facilities and all the enormous opera houses and theaters and stuff like that. But we're concerned about sound design here. So did this change anything of the fact that the big name directors wouldn't think about sound design when they're starting their the pre-production or the pre-planning or writing their performances? It's not going to change that fact. So we're talking about the culture thing that needs to happen in people's minds and education that needs to happen, not the big, facility or the big opera house with the latest light board and the latest of the latest and all the sound and lighting and scenery and mechanical technologies. If that answers your question. One thing it could do is it could attract Cirque du Soleil, for example. It could attract big shows to Egypt, but it's not going to push the cultural process in a different direction. I wouldn't think so.
Any other?
Thank you.
More questions? More other questions? Okay, come on, folks. Come on, get out of your headphone.
How do you see? I make a question that because we are, we are looking forward doing this. I mean, we should be right now. Right now, we should be there, right, doing this event. We're postponing this to 2022. How do you see between people? If you set a festival in one particular city, people will come from Alexandria. That will be in Cairo. The people will come from Alexandria to Cairo. How is this movement of people within those areas, or would benefit having some extended program? Sometimes do something in Alexandria and Cairo. It's just really a practicality. It just helped me in thinking because we are, we're going to start thinking about that, and ideas are welcome.
Who's gonna answer that? Gonna answer that? Hussien gonna answer that, or Mafdy gonna answer that?
A question. Can I talk?
Elena.
Yes. Sorry I came late as I was in the other meeting and they were at the same time. And so I just got a little bit mixed with it. Yeah, I am very interested in I'm sorry because maybe you talk about that, but after what I heard now, I mean, the big productions are investing only in the commercial products, or do you have their investment, or at least a movement of artists working in experimental sound from there? You know, that's what I am very interested in as a performer and as someone who works with a lot with sound and music. And I would like to know how it's going on in the educational. Did you talk about that before?
Okay, about that, answering Abby's and answering Arlene at the same time. By the way, Abby, a big number of attendees, not in this session, from the beginning, from Alexandria. Can you hear me?
A little
Bassam,
bit.
your sound was breaking a bit. I missed what you said. Can you say again?
Okay.
Yeah, not so well, yeah.
By the way, a big number of the attendees to this session, to Siena session, they were from Alexandria, the Egyptian ones. I can say that the Alexandrian culturally, and this comes from the century, the ancient time, because of the bibliotheca, Alexandria library that built from the Greek time. The cultural activities are like the food. So once they know that there is a program is running, even in the capital city, it's about 2.5 hours of driving. So they attend, they come, they there.
Mm.
About answering the educational system and sound design, there is no sound design education sector. I studied theater, scenography, sound design in the Academy of Art. In that Academy of Art, there is 7 institutes: the Conservatoire, Arabic, the Oriental Arabic Institute, the Theater Institute, the Ballet, the Cinema Institute, and the Folklorian Arts. Okay, there is no sound design department.
Mm.
In cinema, there is a sound department related to cinema sound. Okay, the alternative scene, that the artists that came out in the alternative underground scene, from sound engineers, sound designers, we pushed to that direction, if you can say. We're still working on it. We're still trying to push into it. But there is no, compared to America, compared to Europe, compared to Asia, compared to Australia, Latin America, we don't have that department. We're working on it a lot. Before my generation, which is the senior sound engineers, if today they work in the cinema. I'm saying my generation because I consider myself in the middle generation between the really seniors, which is 60s, 70s, 80s years old. I am 45, so the rest, they are younger, much younger. So few people that works in the sector from that 40 to 50 years old. And the rest, they are more 30. So we try to teach them, to mentor them in a way or another, independently, not under a system. If they come today to me and tell me, like for example, I'm not a teacher, but in a way or another, I found myself that I have to create my own curriculum from sound to sound design. And then if somebody is interested to learn, then we go for it. Similar happened with Hussien, similar happened with Mafdy. So it is like that. But there is alternative underground scene. The market itself, there is groups of theater that works with the government, or it is a governmental groups, theater groups, as well as large to medium to small independent theatrical groups, with all between things. The small ones to the large ones, they suffer from production or finding ways to get the money. The small ones, they trying and creating. That's why some of the NGOs or the arts NGOs that start to open and to find ways for getting money for it. Otherwise, you go and work with the government if you have a chance, and then you become an employee more than an artist. You go to work every day to gain your money, and you don't think as an artist. You don't mentally. You are in the phase of being an employee. That I have to rehearse every day from that time to that time in order to get my salary.
Bassam, are you optimistic for young people and young designers to get a better foothold? Do you see emerging possibilities? And if yes, I'm sorry, it's a long question and we have to stop, but if yes, you see something institutional growing?
The independent scene, the alternative scene is suffering for a very long time. Okay? And they still gonna suffer. No. The master of puppets, which is the country sector, is trying to take over or to work as a normal governmental sector. The private investments, that if you to create a production, you have to trigger or try to influence, or you have to I don't want to say bag, but I want to say you have to talk to an investor and find the way as a normal capitalism.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So it's gonna suffer. Yes, it's gonna suffer. To answer, because unless there is a financial investments goes to that sector. Otherwise, for example, the number that's been told at the Opera House, if that big number is spent in the Opera House, I appreciate the building. The project is great. I am with the project, but not to a private company that will produce new performance. It should be a percentage to those startups or a real company, that production company, that can perform. If that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
I think, Bert, last thing before you close up. I think also this is a political thing going on again. I think the regime in Egypt, they associate the independent art scene with what happened in the revolution back in 2011. So the boom of especially the music artists and bands, the boom that happened after the revolution, and the fact that those became the songs related to the revolution of January 25th in Egypt, and actually throughout all the Arab Spring, like throughout the Middle East and the Arab countries, they associated that, oh, this is like a pushing force towards instability and unrest in the country. So we want to highlight. Of course, we will. Like, I have a friend who spent like a year of his life in prison. Another one died in prison. But that's besides this point. It was related to a song that was released on YouTube. To be honest, it's not besides the point, but we're not talking about this in particular. What I'm saying is, I think it's like those are rare. I would say like rare isolated incidents that someone died in a prison, or someone spent a year in prison because he didn't actually participate, but he's in good terms with that singer that released the song that insulted the president. Whatever, everyone knows about this in Egypt, but anyways, it's not about that. It's about like putting back to spotlight people who really artistically expired since the mid-90s. They're bringing them back in a form of like nostalgia and, oh, look at that and look at this. It's all state media propaganda, very old techniques that they've been using again and again. So the spotlight was stolen from the independent art, and because music is always the main, the most famous, the most attended in terms of concerts and performances, and most seen in terms of videos and YouTube stuff. So everything else felt like it's a domino effect. So the theater was affected, independent filmmaking was affected, dance was affected, the whole culture scene was affected as a result of the regime being afraid of having this force pushing towards some unrest, which didn't happen in the first place. It just happened that just this generation that started the revolution in Egypt, whether you like it or not, they had some kind of a background, which is a shared background amongst them, from Aswan all the way down south to Alexandria, to the east, to the west. They were all listening to the same kind of music. They're all up to certain kind of art that is alternative to what they've been seeing as 80s and 90s kids on TV, in all the media, all the state-owned media.
Everybody.
Hope this answered the
Certainly answers.
Yeah. We need to wrap up here, I'm sorry to say, because it's an interesting conversation. But thank you, Bassam and Mafdy and Hussien, for some really interesting information about how things are happening and what's going on in North Africa. And I hope we can meet in a couple years when we actually are in Cairo, and maybe expand on this a little bit more.
That'd be great.
Yes. Okay, everybody.